As the Thanksgiving is approaching, I want to take up the opportunity to explore the historical background behind this holiday. When we study Thanksgiving, we notice that the Native American Indians play a great part in the lives of the settlers. I set out to find out what had happened during the first Thanksgiving in the eyes of the Indians. I have invited a little Indian girl, Chipara, to do an interview with me. I'm sure she can shed some light to me on this subject matter. Here comes this little Indian girl, Chipara. Thank you, Chipara, for doing an interview with me. Can you tell me something about Indians and what did they have to do with the first Thanksgiving?
First of all, there are many different tribes of Indians all over America. Some of the well-known tribes are Abenaki, Mohawk from the northeast, Apache, Cherokee from the southeast, Cheyenne from the plains, Ute from the Great Basin, Apache, Mohave, Navajo, Yavapai from the southwest, Cahuilla, Mono from California. Not every tribe has anything to do with the first Thanksgiving. The Indians we see in the paintings who celebrated the Thanksgiving with the Pilgrims belong to the Wampanoag tribe of Massachusetts in New England.
Very interesting. Could you tell me more about the Wampanoag?
Sure, Wampanoag means people of the first light. In 1600s, the Wampanoag lived in southeastern Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Their population numbered about 12,000 and there were about 60 groups of them. Some of the groups were Nauset in Cape Cod, Patuxet in Plymouth Bay, Herring Pond in both Plymouth and Cape Cod, and one man from the Pleiades group, which a key figure in the first Thanksgiving. Now the Wampanoag are a Native American nation which currently consists only 5 tribes.
It is interesting that you mentioned about Patuxet. The Patuxet were wiped out by a series of plague in the early 1600s, and the traditional first Thanksgiving is regarded as having occurred in 1621. How could the Wampanoag people involved with the English settler?
That's a very good observation. However, before that, entire Wampanoag vanished into the history in the 1620s. One brave Wampanoag individual was instrumental to the survival of the new immigrants from England. That man was Squanto. The story of Squanto and the first Thanksgiving is truly amazing.
Well, I guess Squanto was the one who had courage and a kind heart toward the Pilgrims. What's so extraordinary about this man?
The story began more than 10 years before the first Thanksgiving. Around 608, more than a decade before the Pilgrims landed in a new world, a group of English traders led by Captain Hunt sailed to what is today Plymouth, Massachusetts. When the trusting Wampanoag Indians came out to trade, Hunt took them prisoner, transported them to Spain, and sold them into slavery. But God had an amazing plan for one of those captured Indians, a boy named Squanto. He was then only 12 years old. By the way, Squanto was his original name. Squanto was bought by a well-meaning Spanish monk who treated him well and taught him the Christian faith. Squanto eventually made his way to England and worked in a stable of a man named John Slaney. Slaney understood with Squanto's desire to return home, and he promised to put the Indian on the first vessel bound for America. It wasn't until 1618, 10 years after Squanto was first kidnapped that a ship was found. Finally, after a decade of exile and heartbreak, Squanto was on his way home.
I can see the happy ending of the story.
Not so fast. When Squanto arrived in Massachusetts, more heartbreak awaited him. An epidemic had wiped out Squanto's entire village. We can only imagine what must have gone through Squanto's mind. Why had God allow him to return home against all odds, only to find his loved ones dead? A year later, the answer came. A shipload of English families arrived and settled on the very land once occupied by Squanto's people. Squanto went to meet them, greeting the startled pilgrims in English. The pilgrims told Squanto about their terrible first winter in their new home. Half of them had already died from sickness and starvation. As the pilgrims told their story, the sorrows in their voices broke Squanto's heart. He knew what it was like to lose loved ones. In the weeks that followed, the pilgrims worked hard to learn the way of their new home. Squanto showed them how to plant corn by bearing 3 kernels along with a fish for fertilizer. He taught them how to catch eels in muddy streams, and he also showed them the best places to look for lobster among the sea rocks. When autumn came, the pilgrims decided to set aside a time to thank God for his merciful blessings. They invited Squanto and the other braves from Samoset's tribe to join them. When the feast day came, 90 warriors appeared from the forest, carrying 5 deer, wild turkeys, and all kinds of vegetables. This would be a great feast, and it was the first Thanksgiving.
What happened to Squanto after the first Thanksgiving?
He continued to assist the pilgrims in the colony. He also served as a liaison between the Wampanoag and the pilgrims. On his way back from a meeting to repair damaged relationships between the Wampanoag and pilgrims, he became sick with a fever. Squanto died a few days later in 1622. When Squanto lay dying of a fever, he requested the pilgrims' governor, Bradford, to pray for him that he might go to the Englishman's God in heaven. Squanto gave his properties to his English friends as remembrance of his love.
So, what can we learn from Squanto?
Who but God could so miraculously weave together the lives of a lonely Indian and a struggling band of Englishmen? It's hard not to make comparisons with the biblical story of Joseph, who was also sold into slavery, and whom God likewise used as a special instrument for good. This special instrument, sent of God, changed the course of American history.